Welcome to Transformational Thinking for Health Leaders. I'm Dr. Fiona Day, Master Practitioner Coach and Chartered Coaching Psychologist. This is a podcast that will help you meet your most complex leadership challenges and transform your perspectives, helping you to become a more effective and creative leader with a deeper understanding of yourself and your own world of work. Matt Daniel is an ENT consultant specialising in Paediatric airway. He's also the local lead for undergraduate ENT teaching. He uses coaching as a way to develop others around him and also teaches coaching and leadership. So welcome to Transformational Thinking for Health Leaders, Matt.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you for having me.
So Matt, let's begin maybe with your kind of earlier life and career and how that's influenced your choices over the years and your development into a surgeon educator and a coach.
So I actually almost didn't go to medical school because I grew up abroad and came to UK when I was 16. I always knew that I was interested in medicine beforehand, but when I landed in UK, very much there was an attitude that English was my second language and medicine would be out of reach. So I was kind of put off doing medicine and didn't actually apply to medicine straight away. But afterwards, once I'd done my A-levels, it turned out that I got the grades and then I applied to medicine after having some time out. And I kind of enjoyed it from quite early on and discovered probably quite early on in my career that I was interested in the kind of medicine where I like to see results. I like to do stuff that leads to results, and that kind of naturally led me down the surgical route, if you like. I didn't know if surgery was going to be for me, so thankfully I'm old enough to have trained at a time when it was perfectly okay not to know what you want to do, and it was perfectly okay to either travel or go to Australia or just do A&E for a bit. And in fact, most of us did that, and I really kind of benefited from that ability early on in my career to experiment and try different things. And then ended up settling in ENT, which was more by happenstance than by design. And I happened to rotate through ENT, and I thought, wow, these people are like me. I like these people. They think like me. They're pleasant. They're friendly. Very early on, even in those days as a house officer F1, I had the ability to treat people, discharge people. I performed procedures, and I found that very, very satisfying. And then kind of stayed in ENT. I always thought that when you became a consultant, that was going to be the pinnacle of my career. And I kind of thought, that's it, I'm a consultant now that I've arrived. And then when I got to being a consultant, I kind of thought, well, there's two things really. The first thought was, I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's just a matter until they all find out. And, and that lasted for about 5 years. So that was the first thing. But the second thing really was, is this it? So, now I'm a consultant and then what? And, I've my whole career, as with many of us, it's been, going from one tick box, you pass your ARCP, you do your exam, and it's been one step after another. And then when I became a consultant, there wasn't sort of any really clear steps from there onwards. We also had some serious health problems when I was a consultant, and that's when I sought you out as a coach. And I remember having coaching with you a number of years ago to try and see where's my career going and what's next for my career. And one of the things that I took away from our discussion was that a real golden thread that has ran through my career ever since the coaching that we did together was the idea that I like developing people. And that's become a golden thread that's pretty much ran through the rest of my career, ever since we worked together. And that's kind of manifested in different ways. Is for a long time, I did quite a lot of postgraduate supervision. I was training program director and very much involved in postgraduate training. And then I kind of moved more into undergraduate training, which is probably where I am now. And I've been the undergraduate lead for ENT. I've been involved with professionalism, and I teach a special study module on coaching, mentoring and leadership for medical students. And I love doing that. And I probably kind of alongside that over the last few years have become probably much more interested in doctors' careers. So I'm doing quite a lot of work around doctors' careers, and that's around, whether that's developing the people that I work with, whether that's trainees, and kind of looking at people's careers, not just the technical skills, but how their careers develop and how their careers progress. And as part of that, I'm the hospital lead for medical career support and development, and I've put on a series of events that are really aimed at helping principally consultants and helping develop consultants' careers. And I'm kind of really enjoying that career world.
Wow, thank you. So from those kind of early days then of not being sure if medicine was something that was going to be attainable to you, through to becoming a consultant, and then those kind of like, can I do it? I'm going to be found out, to the what do I do next kind of thing, and then how you've really reinvented yourself over the last few years then, in terms of the kind of the developing other people and the golden thread that's really running through your career. It's really wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess like you were saying, the kind of move towards more undergraduate and trainee, perhaps a little bit as well, leadership development. But tell us a little bit about the module that you're running then, your SSM, and how we develop undergraduates' leadership skills, how we develop trainees' leadership skills. Is there a difference? What have you kind of observed and learnt over the years of your experience around this?
The reason that I started doing the undergraduate special study module was because all of us are leaders, and leadership development starts early. And probably if I look back at my career, I don't think I really had sort of any leadership development early on in my career. The focus was very much on the technical skills, whether that's diagnostic or prescribing, whatever it might be, but that kind of clinical skills, rather than anything to do with soft skills in inverted commas or non-technical skills. And I think sort of that's why I became interested in doing something for medical students. There is, leadership is part of the undergraduate course, so there are elements of that run through the curriculum as well. The special study module is a 4-week module, so I have students that come with me for 4 weeks full time, which is a really generous amount of time to have students. So it's self-selected, so not everybody comes, but the advantage of that is that the people that come are normally really interested. And I've married the idea of coaching and leadership together because I teach them coaching skills and they develop as a leader alongside. And what I mean by that is that I teach them coaching skills, and then they use those coaching skills to help their colleagues' leadership development. So, and I run, there's always a bit of a kind of thing, which one comes first, the leadership of the coaching / mentoring. So we talk about different leadership concepts, about leadership models. They do kind of some self-assessment questionnaires. And then through that, they get to learn themselves. They get to recognize what their values are, what their strengths are. We talk about emotional intelligence and about different leadership style and different leadership models. And then in parallel to that, I teach them coaching skills, and then they coach each other on their own leadership development. And actually, I'm really proud of that. We get really good feedback. Almost inevitably, people say that they wish that every student had the opportunity to do that. And of course, with time being restricted as it is, the reality is that it's unlikely that, that every student would get access to that. But what I'm hoping is that the people that go through that they have a much better understanding of themselves. They know what their values are, they know what their strengths are, and that's the kind of stuff that I only really nailed myself, when I sought coaching with you when I was in my 40s. Yeah. So hopefully these people are 20 years ahead of where I was, because, early on they're recognizing what their values are and what their strengths are. I'm hoping that through that, they're much, much further along the leadership journey than most other people are. And plus, they've also learned some coaching skills that they can apply. And I'm not training them to be independent executive coaches, so it's not about that. But it's about giving them the kind of coaching skills that they can apply to the team around them to effectively. That means that they've got the skills to have a really high quality conversation with some really good listening and some really good questions. And if they walk out of that SSM knowing more about themselves and what drives them and what their values are and how they want to be and making conscious decisions, that's important. And if they've got the kind of skills but they can have a really high quality conversation with the people around them, then, I'm really happy if that's been achieved. Yeah. In terms of sort of how it's different to to postgraduate, I think probably context. I think it's, I'd love to take our ENT trainees and say for the next month, you're not going to be doing a clinical job. You're just going to be doing a special study module. But that's never going to happen. So I think it's not that the skills or the topics are any different. In fact, I think they're often quite the same. But maybe how one does that is different. Our current ENT training program director is really interested in careers, and we're actually sort of putting together for next year, a series of leadership events for our regional ENT trainees, which is kind of going to be a day-long event, and we'll pick some topics that we talk about leadership. And I think that's really quite progressive, so that it's not, sort of here's a day on sinus anatomy, or here's a day on, I don't know, pathology of something or other, but the current TPD is actually putting on a day on leadership. And I'm gonna help her run some of that. So I think that's really progressive. The other things that I think in postgraduate thing that also work very well would be certainly in ENT. I get asked quite often for other regions to say, can you just sort of do 20 minutes on careers or something like that. In our hospital, will often ask me, can you talk about, I don't know, 20 minutes or emotional intelligence or life balance or whatever it might be. So I think it's great that people are recognizing the values of that, and they are bringing it, not necessarily a 4-week module on something, but 20 minutes sort of talks or 1-day talks, and I think that kind of stuff is really important. And I hope that those people that organize training formally will kind of say, okay, maybe we can't give them a 4-week module on leadership, but how about we do half a day here and there, or or even half an hour, just sort of to get people thinking and get people's awareness. In practical term, I think for me, for leadership development, probably the major thing for me would be how I help the trainee that works with me, and that in many ways that's good, because the surgical training is still very much an apprenticeship-based model. So, I get a trainee and they operate with me, once a week for 6 months. So actually that's a really, really strong and rich relationship. And I suspect a lot of people in medicine do not have that kind of relationship anymore, that maybe in the past everybody would have had that apprenticeship, and probably a lot of people don't benefit from that. So the trainee that I work with, for 6 months, that we operate together on a weekly basis, that gives me a really deep connection, and then I get to know them, and I can help them talk about what their values are, and I can put leadership opportunities their way, whether that's leading in team or developing their communication skills or how they seek feedback. A lot of that is about me role modeling, so that might be how I seek feedback and how I do stuff. And that's not to say that I'm perfect, because often I kind of say, do you know what, I didn't do that very well, and that's an important thing as a consultant training, is to say, actually, I don't think I did that very well, or that could have been done better. And actually, it's interesting, because I learned that from the person that was my fellowship director. There's a chap called Alan Cheng in Sydney, and when I did my fellowship, he would always kind of say, could we have done that better? And I'm kind of thinking, like, you fellowship director, like you're on top of it. Well, what are you talking about? You have done that better. Surely you're expert. And he'd say, well, I wonder if I could have done that better. And it always kind of surprised me that he would question, could I have done that better? But that was a really useful learning point that I've kind of carried on to kind of reflect, to say, actually, maybe I didn't do that well, or maybe I could have done that better. So the downside of that surgical trainer-trainee relationship is that's just one person, so I haven't perhaps got the same impact that I might have, if I did something at deanery level or undergraduate level. So I think that the topics are not necessarily different, but it's how you go about it and how you realistically make it happen. I think that perhaps is the difference.
Wow, so it sounds like you're making a real difference to the cohort of medical students that you get to work with quite intensively over that 4-week period, and then also with the kind of trainees that come through, as well as the kind of the drip feed, I suppose, of all the little things that you do here and there that kind of light fires around different parts of your local system. So yeah, really great to hear all of that. Thank you for sharing all of that. And it sounds, really very innovative as well. And I know that kind of creativity is something that kind of really matters to you in your work. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you bring creativity into your work, Matt?
So I think creativity for me is interesting because for a huge chunk of my career, I thought there's just one way that we do stuff. This is how we do stuff. We don't deviate. There's a well-trodden pathway. And then somewhere along the line, I kind of abandoned that and said, what, I'm just going to be me. And I'm going to do the kind of stuff that's me. And I'm going to do it. And that's okay. And it probably started with when I became a consultant. I was the first fellowship trained pediatric airway surgeon in my unit, and the theatre staff were quite on edge and a little bit wary because I was doing a lot of stuff that they weren't doing before that was more complex than they were used to. And I realized that I probably needed to do something to create psychological safety in the team. And the way that I did that is I started using picture cards to do theatre debrief. And at the end of every theatre session, normally we say, how was today? It was all fine, bye, and everybody disappears, yeah. Or the other way that it sometimes goes is, you were awful, this was awful, I can't believe you did that, you're an evil person, and that's not particularly helpful. Or we all sit around and kind of say, NHS is terrible, there's no beds, and I can't believe that the waiting list coordinator did that and the nurse on the ward was slow, and that's not particularly helpful either. So what I did, I kind of posed a question, and the question might be, if I think sort of something that we've done just recently, we got registrars have just rotated. So, a question at the beginning might be, pick a card that describes what this team is like, and everybody picks a picture, and then we talk about picture. Or when a trainee leaves, we say, pick a picture that describes what you're going to miss about a trainee. In the beginning, when we perhaps didn't quite have that psychological safety, 14 years ago when I became a consultant, it would be pick a card that says something about you, and we just kind of started with getting to know each other, and everybody would pick a card that says about themselves, or pick a card that says how you feel, or pick a picture that describes how today's theatre list went. Yeah, that by creating that sort of structure, picking a picture, that was easier for people to do, because if I say how was today's theatre list, like people wouldn't know what to talk about. By giving people a picture, that meant that people could pick a picture and talk about it, and that kind of created psychological safety. And I think that probably for me was the beginning of that creativity, and I've done lots and lots of stuff with pictures that's been different. So I guess there's some much more traditional sort of ways that creativity for me shows, and some of them are obvious because it might be, I like to do a nice presentation. I always have lots of pictures, so sometimes video. So that's traditional creativity. But the other thing where it's perhaps not obvious for me is in guidelines. So I've written quite a lot of guidelines, both internally, and have been involved with guidelines at national level. But actually sort of writing a guideline, that for me is also a really creative process, because that's about writing, that's about writing in a way that is accessible, that people understand, that gets the message across, but also in a way that's beautiful and coherent. And that kind of, people might say, what are you talking about writing a guidelines being creative? But I do kind of see that it's not obviously creative, but for me, writing a guideline, that actually is a very creative progress, creating something that looks beautiful, that's fit for purpose, that's easy to understand. That actually for me is really quite a creative process. But the cards perhaps were the obvious thing. And I remember when I first brought them in, people were like, he's what on earth what's he doing now? Sort of with that, and everybody thought that that I'd gone nuts. But if everybody really buys into it, it created the psychological safety, and I've continued. I don't do that as much now as in the past, because we don't need that psychological safety, because we probably got that much more embedded. But I often bring the cards up, and people always love it, and it is for all of us very much then it creates a creative discussion rather than everything was fine, off you go.
Yeah, I love that, and I really like the idea, I suppose, of how those picture cards really facilitate a very different kind of conversation, don't they? From the kind of the glib answers of people just kind of wanting to rush out of the door, or kind of
Yeah.
complain about, understandably, the difficulties that they're facing, but you have a kind of different conversation as a consequence of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned earlier about this kind of authenticity and embracing who you are and kind of really playing to your strengths. Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that, and perhaps, leading into the training that you've done, because I know like me, you're committed to the professionalization of coaching. You've done your EMCC independent accreditation at senior practitioner level and a master's in coaching. Really curious about your research, which I've read published a couple of years ago, which was just really wonderful to read. And yeah, I'd just love to kind of hear a bit more about that, if there's anything you're willing to share.
So I think for me, I mean, there's several facets to that. Yeah. So I'm gay, and and I'm a surgeon, and I'm 51. So for a huge chunk of my career, it would be unfathomable to have a gay surgeon. Yeah, it was invisible and it didn't happen. I'm sure there were gay surgeons that existed, yeah, undoubtedly, but it wouldn't be in public domain. And I don't remember sort of having role models. And in fact, even now, I would sort of still struggle to find, who would be my role model of somebody who's a surgeon and who's gay. And the problem with that is, if you don't see people like you in positions of seniority and power, that makes it very difficult to imagine yourself. And this isn't just about gay stuff, because this turns about women in senior leadership, or black people in senior leadership. If you don't see black people, women, gays, whatever, in senior leadership, you say, well, there's no people like me in that, and then people don't approach that. So I guess for me, it's as my career is much more secure, and I haven't really got anything to prove, and I don't really care what anybody else thinks. For me, that being visible and being visibly out has become really important, and not so much for me necessarily, but to be of use to other people, because I know there's large parts of the world where being gay is still illegal and punishable by prison or worse. In UK, we're a relatively tolerant society. We are going backwards, as and by all metrics of not just gay, but in general, if you look at all metrics of how we tolerate and how we treat each other, we're not as tolerant a society as we were in the past. Again, not just sort of for gay related issues, but tolerance in general. So I think for me, that being visible, so that people that are younger than me can sort of see somebody who is out and gay and in a senior leadership role, I think that kind of for me has become very, very important. And it's not about rubbing everybody's noses into it, or talking about it at every opportunity. It's not about that, but it just sort of making it clear that that I am gay. If people want to talk to me about being a gay consultant, a gay doctor, that's kind of very welcome. And it's not very often that people do, but I think the main thing is just that people see there's a senior doctor in a senior leadership role who happens to be gay, and they're a senior doctor and they just happen to be gay. Yeah, I think that kind of visibility for me has become really important. The issue of being authentically me is, I think, part of that for me links into creativity, and there's not necessarily a link between being gay and being creative, so it's not about that, but it's that when you're trying to conform to a stereotype, you're trying to fit into a box, there's bits of you that you chop off and kind of say, which bits of me look like a white male 51-year-old consultant surgeon, that's what I look like, and that's what everybody else sees, and then it's trying to chop off the bits that don't fit that image. And maybe one of the things that for me is relevant about my authenticity and about my gay identity is to sort of to say, actually, I don't have to restrict myself to the repertoire that is the white male 51-year-old consultant surgeon, and and actually there's all of these different aspects of my life and my identity, and and my personality and my values, etc., and that it's okay to bring some of those in, and that in many ways was very freeing. So that idea that I don't have to try and fit into a box. I am who I am, and I'm going to go to work, and and that's how it's going to be represented. And creativity, very very much for me has been an expression of that stepping out of the box, because I'm guessing how many white male 51-year-old consultant surgeons would be happy bringing a set of picture cards into the theatre team and saying, pick a card that tells me how you feel. Maybe I'm painting stereotypes now. So in fact, almost certainly I'm painting stereotypes now. But it's that recognition that actually it doesn't matter whether you're gay or not, but all of us are multifaceted. Whatever you have, if you do find a way of expressing who you are and what your values are and what you bring and what your identity is, I think then our careers are richer, our relationships are richer. And in my case, that happens to be around being gay or around creativity, but in other people, it's going to be something different. It doesn't really matter what it is. The point is that our lives are richer and our relationships are better if we are able to express all of the multifaceted aspects of our existence, rather than trying to restrict ourselves to a stereotype because that's what's needed to climb the career ladder. And the downside, of course, is that for most of us, we did have to restrict ourselves in order to progress and get where we are today. But it's probably not really needed. And certainly as a consultant, you don't need to restrict yourself to a stereotype. I did research on how coaching can help gay men at work, and that was part of that was kind of my own personal interest in my own personal identity journey, and I was interested in seeing what if a gay man comes to coaching, in work-related issues, what does it matter, and what does a coach need to do with that? And it was qualitative research, so that meant that I interviewed people, and what I got from that was, my interpretation of what other people have said. So it's kind of a collection of stories and people's experiences mingled together with mine and my interpretation. And I guess probably the first thing to say would be that just because somebody's gay, that doesn't mean that is of any relevance whatsoever in terms of what the workplace issues are. And that there's a challenge, and same as I don't know, if a woman comes and says, this is because you're a woman, and you can say, no, it's nothing to do with the fact that I'm a woman, and it's I'm struggling to make myself heard. It's because you're a woman, isn't it? No, it's nothing to do with me being a woman. So is that not making assumption, whether it's a woman or a man or whatever, or a gay man, it's not making assumptions that is relevant. It might be relevant, it might not be relevant. But the first thing to say is that just because somebody's gay, that doesn't mean that is of any relevance whatsoever in what they need in terms of their leadership development. I think that the slight flip side of that is that it might be relevant, but the important thing, and I'd say this whether that's in coaching or actually in our careers in general, the important thing that I would say is that there needs to be it needs to be okay for people to discuss it. And again, if I translate that away from coaching and maybe into, I don't know, if I kind of think into my career, majority of the time being gay is completely irrelevant in my career. So I don't need any help. I don't need any support. I don't need people sort of to check on me on a daily basis to say, Matt, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable you are being gay. It's like, it's nonsense. But what I do need, and I think what other people need is they need it to be okay for us to talk about that. And I think the same will happen, for any other protected characteristic. And again, maybe, if you're a black person, it's not necessarily a problem, but it needs to be okay to talk about that. Or if you're a woman in a senior leadership role, it probably isn't an issue, but there needs to be a way where it's okay to talk about that. So what's a problem is if you say, oh no, we're not going to talk about these issues, it's all swept under the carpet. That's a problem. So it's probably not an issue, but there needs to be a way that it's okay to talk about it. And I think really sort of, that kind of was that's probably a high level summary of my research, but also how that translates into that workplace. Yeah, that in my case, it was to do with gay men, but my guess would be that if you are from a minority group, it may be nothing to do with that whatsoever. But what is important is that it's okay to talk about that, and and if I want to talk about it, or if you want to talk about it, it's perfectly okay to put it on the agenda. Yeah, that's probably kind of a quick summary.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that really struck me about your research was the concept of allyship and gay allyship. And I suppose is that the same as what you've just been covering there, or is there anything in terms of advice for listeners in terms of how to be a better gay ally, and for me, for anybody listening, like how can we all be better allies for a range of minoritized groups? But obviously this is your particular area of expertise.
So I think a lot of this is written in all sorts of contexts. Yeah, the concept of allyship also shows up in whether it's race related or gender related, or ability or whatever. So probably for other people would be prepared to talk about it. Yeah. That would, for me, would be the main thing. And I think sometimes people are scared. And again, maybe if I flip that around and maybe sort of talk about myself and and race or gender, yeah, and sort of sometimes say I'm going to get the language wrong, I'm going to get terminology wrong, I'm going to sort of say something that's offensive, and the problem with that is that gets in the way of me having those kind of discussions, yeah. And if I kind of flip that around, sort of to you other people that are straight, they think I'm going to get the acronyms wrong, and I'm going to make assumptions, and the problem with that is it all just gets into the way, and I say, well, if you get the acronym wrong, I'll tell you. And and if you made assumptions, I'll tell you, and I'll be delighted that you're willing to talk about it. I don't care if you get the acronym wrong or if you make assumptions. If you say something that's wrong, I'll just tell you. I'll correct you. Yeah, and that's okay. But the biggest thing for me with allyship would be willing to talk about it. And be open. And if I want to put it on the agenda, make it clear that it's welcome on the agenda. Yeah, sort of it's not shutting people down. Make it clear that it's okay to talk about, and doesn't need to be a big thing about it. But yeah, just make it clear. If you want to talk about that, yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, there are sort of some. At the risk of trying to push it, there's the how people are included, which is sort of how's your husband, sort of those kind of questions, that makes it clear that sort of somebody's included. There's something about about language that if I think whenever I go to my GP and sort of, and they always say how my other half, how is she? Well, it's a he, and and that's a kind of an endless battle that as a patient everybody around me sort of assumes that my other half is female. So don't make assumptions about what people's partners are. And also, one of the things that is, I think, quite nice is the rainbow badges and the rainbow lanyard, because that for me is, if I see my straight colleagues that wear a rainbow badge, that tells me that, that's important to you. And it's a really sort of small thing, but, when I see that, you kind of say, yeah, this person recognizes that this matters and it's a problem. And there's an awful lot of people that are still stigmatized and struggling. And that kind of things matters. But principally is don't worry about getting it wrong, because if you get it wrong, I'll tell you. Yeah, but just be willing to put it on the agenda if I want to put it on the agenda.
Thank you for sharing that. And I suppose just in terms of starting to bring things to a close, just thinking about the kind of key insights, I suppose, for you, for how you really transformed your career, haven't you, since that kind of being a consultant surgeon and asking yourself, is that it, to all the range of different things that you have done now. I suppose I'm just curious around how you have kind of developed yourself and being conscious about that, and your main insight, just to close with, please.
So it's perhaps something to do with my value, and a big value for me is love of learning. I love learning new things, and at the moment I'm doing senior leadership apprenticeship. I'm also learning French, so I'm just sort of having 2 hours of French lesson. And for me, that's a way that I'm continuously learning and developing, and it'll be different things for different people. Again, I have a friend who's learning Spanish, for example, as a foreign language, so it might not be anything particularly medical related. But I'd say certainly in healthcare, most of us have a real thirst for knowledge, because that's why he ended up in that's how we made it through medical school, that's how we made it through our postgraduate training. So we all have a real thirst for knowledge, and it's sad when that kind of disappears. And probably a big insight for me would be that it's okay to continue learning, and it's okay to be in your 50s and to be learning, and it's really it's enriching. It's interesting, it's fascinating. There's no pressure. I don't have to pass a degree. I'm not doing French in order to sit a GCSE or a A level. It's just for my own interest. So there's no particular pressure. But a key insight for me would be that most of us are in healthcare because of a love of learning in the first place, and it's just trying to rediscover that love of learning, whatever it might be, and then continuing to do that, because otherwise you just go stagnant, and it doesn't matter what it is that you're learning, but continuing to do something for yourself that interests you, that develops you.
I love hearing about that. You're identifying that value and then really kind of connecting with it and kind of building your life from that. It's really wonderful to hear. So Matt, thank you ever so much for your time today. It's been fantastic talking with you and hearing about all these amazing things that you've been doing and are continuing to do. And really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to find out more, head over to www.fionadayconsulting.co.uk and you'll receive 3 hours of free CPD, the Health Career Success Programme, when you sign up to my newsletter. And there's loads of other resources to support you as a medical or public health leader on my website too. Thanks for listening.